What's up, tubulars? I have missed you beautiful humans. I really have. And if you're a subscriber, thank you so much. I really appreciate you. And some of you might be like, hey, 2019, it is almost the end of January. I get it. Like, I know you guys have been out there and doing your thing, and that is awesome. I hope you are crushing it in the new year. And I've got some big stuff happening on this channel, so that's what I've been working on. But one of the things that I really felt like I needed to help quite a few of you folks on when it comes to like your new endeavors and your new projects, because the new year always brings this excitement, right? Well, podcasting is continuing to blow up. So I want to pivot over to podcasting and really build on a video that I had done. That'll be linked up, description somewhere up here. You should really check it out because I think it's still the best, at least one of the best podcasting setups that you'll likely need, especially when it comes to working with virtual guests and virtual hosts like via Skype or Google, like they're not in the same space as you are. Like I said, check that out. But what people have done, they've checked it out and they're like, okay, I got the microphone, like the one that's back here. And I also got a handheld recorder like this, like the Zoom H6 or something like equivalent. So many of you are like, all right, I got my story or I got my content, I've got my guest, I know what I'm doing, but what do I do with this? Like I get like plugging it in and I talked about that, but then it's like, okay, I have these files now. Where do the files go? And then how, like I need to get them up to the internet. So, I've been kind of winging it and I've uploaded these very large WAV files. Well, I've seen that on podcasts. Like I've seen people, I think I just like spit there. I've seen people literally just upload the uncompressed WAV files, and they're very large files, and that makes it hard for your listeners to stream that content because most people are consuming podcasts on a phone. So if they're streaming and their data is not allowing it, like they don't have a good connection or whatever, we need to help you out. We need to help them out. So I want to talk about some very basic file formats here. So if you're a more advanced podcaster or voice over like editor or whatever you're doing out there when it comes to audio, this likely might not be the video for you. Like if you just happened upon it and you're not like a subscriber, although you should subscribe because there's going to be more stuff that's a little bit like higher level. I just need to get people started here because you've reached out, you've asked, I need to answer you. So first and foremost, we've got the Zoom, and if you have a handheld recorder, I've got the Zoom H6 as an example. Let's actually get your recording format set up. Well, here's hold on a second. Let's talk about recording format for just a minute because I mentioned WAV files, didn't I? So the WAV file is uncompressed. So there's more data, and these are larger files. The best way that I can explain it is think about ingredients for cooking or baking. So if you're baking a cake, cupcakes, cookies, and if you don't like sweets, maybe it's a quiche, whatever, just that's the perspective. It's the ingredients that you need to eventually bake whatever it is that you're baking, because the WAV file are all the ingredients uncompressed. The .mp3 file is once it's baked. Okay, but we want to record in a WAV file. So what we want to do here is take the handheld recorder, get it in our hands or on the desk or whatever, and so we're going to go to the menu and we're going to click on the menu, and we're going to go into the menu here, and there's a toggle button here. So we are going to toggle down to the very bright red recording circle there, sphere, and we are going to select that with the toggle button because you can push that in. And then you are going to select that again, and we're going to go to recording format. Now, the recording format that I am recommending to you is WAV 44.1 kilohertz / 16-bit. And that should likely be the first selection that you have there. Go ahead and check that box and then menu back out of it, and you're going to be recording in what I'm recommending and what I think is plenty for a podcast. And like I said, the best way, if you're asking like, well, 16-bit, 24-bit, what? It's more and more data, so the file sizes are going to be much larger. And honestly, I think for a podcast, 16-bit is just fine. So let's go, and we're going to be working with a WAV file. So now we have to then do what with the WAV file? Well, first off, like how do I get this stuff? Well, once you've recorded, so you've got your track on track 1, and let's say you've got your guest on track 2, Then what? All right, well, we need to actually take this SD card. So we just open this up here, take the SD card out of the Zoom because we finished recording, and we need to do what? Well, we put it wherever I use a Mac, so, and it's recent, so I lead the dongle life here, and so we're gonna use that to put our SD card in, and then we are gonna get our files. So let's get over on the computer and check that out. All right, so we have got the computer set up here, and I'm actually just recording in my podcasting mic because I've tried to record this a couple times and the sound was just terrible because my computer fans are just kind of fired up. So I didn't want that. That was so terrible. It's like a terrible distraction. Anyway, let's get into it. My SD card labeled here as H6_SD. Now yours could be something like untitled, no name, unnamed, or whatever. But I just went ahead and named it in my computer. So you'll see all of these folders, and this is just kind of how I have it set up in my Zoom. And by default, everything just goes into folder 01, which that's not a problem for me. And then in the subfolders, these are all of the different instances of whatever podcast or voiceover that I've done. Now, as an example, this is kind of what you're going to get. Look in that subfolder. 0019, the file name is tied to the folder, and that's track 1. And ultimately, no matter what, like if you've had like 3 or 4 separate tracks, like you're recording all at the same time, they're all going to end up in that same folder. Because as an example, we did this podcast. So my business partner and we did a podcast together. And so both of our tracks, I've already labeled these, but I didn't move anything anywhere. It was just track 1 and track 2 that just defaulted into these folders. So you don't have to like go hunting for where's track 1, track 2, and track 3. It all ends up in the same folder on that same recording. Hopefully that makes sense. Now, for the sake of I'm on a Mac and this is free, we're going to use GarageBand, but if you're on a Windows machine, there's Audacity, that's open source and cross-platform, so it actually works on a Mac. There's some other options out there, but I'm on a Mac, so that's what we're going to use. It's free. I have since graduated to another program called Logic Pro, and you don't need that. I mean, you're just starting out. We're good here. And I think this is a great place to land because work with free, especially when you're first starting out. So we've got an empty project. We'll choose an empty project. And by default, it'll kind of come up with like this window. It's audio, but I'm also not really worried about the inputs. And what this is asking about as far as like any recording inputs like microphones and things like that. We're not recording in GarageBand. We've already recorded the audio. We're just laying the tracks in there. So I'm not worried about input. So we're just going to go ahead and create this project, and it'll default to audio 1. So like that's my first track. So here's what we're going to do is we're going to go to the Finder here, and I'm going to just drag that first track there. And it's going to copy it, pull it from that SD card, and put it into GarageBand. And then we can go up here to track and do a new track, or just for the sake of time, if I just automatically drag her voice on track where track 2 would be, then it's going to copy that and it'll automatically just create that for me. And the nice thing too is that it's already labeled because I've already labeled these anyway. Now, this is not detailed audio like sound design or anything. I just wanted to let you know that when you are editing, you should be using headphones, not like Beats headphones, because these are very bass heavy. I'm just listening to my own voice, like my own monitor. They're just monitoring my own voice right now. But when you are editing, I recommend just making sure that the metronome's on. So just making sure that my voice is high enough, but not going up into the red. And the same thing for her, that it's high enough and it feels like even enough, because obviously my frequency, my voice is going to be different than hers. So I may have to drop my audio down and bring hers up. Like I said, we're not going detailed here as far as like -6 dB, negative this, negative that. Like we're not talking about decibels and things like that. These are the files that we're working with. Another thing too is that you want to cut out the ums and ahs. So you would be editing in GarageBand to cut those things out. And so depending on what I want to cut, like I just take a section and cut it. But let me just actually show you in Logic what I've done just to save some time here. So it's just based on your editor. But you can see here with this podcast, I've already cut out the dead space. So it's when she was actually talking and I wasn't. We were in the same room, so some of her audio was coming through on my mic. And so we just kind of cut sections out. And like I said, you just cut out dead space or things that you didn't mean to say, ums and ahs, and so on and so forth. So that's what a cut looks like as far as this workflow is concerned. Now, going back to GarageBand, what we need to do, we've already cut it, and we need to share it, we need to export it, we need to bounce it. Depending on what platform you're using, or what program you're using, then we need to get it into an MP3 format. So in GarageBand, it says export song to disk. Don't worry about exporting to, or sending to iTunes and media browser and so forth. This is what we're doing. And so we're going to export that song or voice, doesn't matter what it's called, it's just a voice. And then we'll just call this YouTube editing audio, whatever. We want it to be MP3. And then I like medium quality at 128K. That's plenty, in my opinion, for voice, for podcasting, because the higher up you go to 192 or 256, the larger the file. Remember, people are streaming this on their phones. I kind of like that balance of 128K because essentially it'll give you that quality, and it'll be clear enough, it'll be fine, and keep that file size reasonable. So we'll go ahead and export this. And it's bouncing. And for the sake of time, why don't we just kind of let this bounce? All right, so we've got our MP3 here, and as you can see, 47 megs, and the WAV files each were like 250, so times 2, over 500 megs. So we've definitely compressed that down. We have baked that file. And then if we open that up, we will then hear everything all in one track. Acts with them, delivering good customer service. There's me.
I feel like
There's Marie.
Set the goals that we want.
Okay, so it's all in the same track. It's all baked in, ready to go. All right, so now you might be saying, okay, what is next? Well, what is next is, where do we put this MP3 file? Because people might ask, do I upload it to my website? No, do not do that. There are so many reasons why. You don't want people streaming on your website. I'm not going to go into detail about that later. Much more to come in upcoming videos. But Anchor is a great platform because it's free. It's a great place to start. And essentially what Anchor does is you create an account, you create your show, and it'll create an RSS feed. So then you have a show name and then an RSS feed tied to that. Just like a website, blog post, or anything that people download, it's an address that people can find your stuff. So when you have like whatever podcast name it is and they go into their podcast player and they search, Anchor has already taken care of that RSS feed, and then that podcast, like it's an aggregator. So that app that you're using to stream that media, it's an aggregator and it's pulling that in. So if they type in the name of your podcast, it should come up, hopefully if they type it correctly or whatever. And then Anchor is pushing that out to Podcast Addict, Apple Podcasts, or whatever they're using, Spotify, to listen to podcasts. So Anchor will take care of that for you for free, and then you just continue to upload your MP3s there, and you can promote from there. But that's where you host your MP3s. Don't self-host. Another one would be Lipson, and I've used both of these. I have experience with both, and I like both. Lipson, however, it's paid. It starts at about $5 per month, and that's just based on how many files you upload per month, or how much like megs you're uploading per month. But it rolls over. So again, not a lot of detail here. But it creates that RSS feed. It allows people to find your podcast out there in the interwebs. So Libsyn's great, and like I said, it's for additional money. Then you get like more analytics, like more data as far as like who's downloading, where they're downloading from, so on and so forth. It just depends on how many podcasts you have, or how long your podcast is, or how many times you upload, and how much information you have up on their hosts based on their tiers. So So I'll follow up with more info on these hosts. But for right now, I don't think you can go wrong with either one. I use both of them. I do really like Lipson because it offers a little bit more options. And so, like I said, you can check it out and I'll link everything up. All right, so hopefully that in some way was helpful. It was longer than I had anticipated, at least as in my planning, but I want to give you the information so that you can go do your thing. So that's what we're going to leave it at. We're going to get out of here quick. We're going to take action. So I want you out, going, doing your stuff. I want you crushing it. I want you taking some steps forward. So get it done, folks. I really appreciate each and every one of you. And if you haven't subscribed, please be sure to do that. If you do have further questions, comments, or anything, leave them below because I'll be in there trying to help each and every one of you as much as I possibly can. So as always, go do things that matter. Keep rocking faces. Thanks so much for tuning in, and definitely catch you on the next one.